every place I interviewed at was a 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. type model, Monday through Friday, but none of them would give me the autonomy of being able to be a mom. My 8-year-old now, she was 4 months old, I believe, when I started my practice and went out on my own. It's one of my goals to try to educate fellow mental health practitioners that this is doable, but you have to be strategic and intentional and conservative about it.
So excited for you all to listen to today's episode. Dr. Brittany Albright, who founded Sweetgrass Psychiatry. The coolest thing about Brittany is all the things that she's had to overcome are so relevant across all verticals and all kind of entrepreneurial pursuits. Building a small business, or building a business actually has become a very nice sized business without any business training. She didn't know what she was doing. She learned along the way, and she got mentorships, and she got, help from friends and family to kind of support her journey. She had a focus, which many entrepreneurs do, on saying, how do we make this better? I'm going into an industry and I want to make it better. For her, it was how do I provide quality, affordability, and access in the healthcare system, which normally it's 2 or 3. And as her mentors told her, you might have to pick your poison. Third, innovation in all of our industries are happening so fast. AI, both helping you run your business more effectively and potentially providing more value to your customers and or patients. And really lastly, utilizing your platform to go out there and share your knowledge base to help the next generation of, in her case, psychiatrists, but in any case, whoever is in your field, how do you help the next generation be as successful? So I was both inspired, I learned a ton, and Brittany's just super cool in general. And we had a little background from Simon, her dog, who wanted to join the conversation as well, which was also super cool. So I hope you're going to enjoy. Please listen and enjoy. Thanks so much. Hey, welcome to another episode of Business Underdog. I'm your host, Eric Remer, and super excited for this episode. Have a chance to connect with a really amazing entrepreneur, somebody who's providing so much amazing value to their community, and somebody that is both inspirational that we all can learn from. So I'm excited to introduce Dr. Brittany Albright, founder and CEO of Sweetgrass Psychiatry. And today, in the episode, we're going to focus on several things that I think are relevant across all industries and really for all small business owners. Number one, how do you build a business without any business experience, which Brittany will talk about her experience? What are the challenges of providing both quality, affordable, and accessible care in the healthcare system that often doesn't allow that? What is the innovation in psychiatry, both from a technology, AI, as well as from a modality, psychedelics and other types of stuff that are beginning to make real big impacts in the world? And lastly, learn about Brittany's kind of, role as kind of almost a national speaker for psychiatry, and also her mentorship for the next generation of up-and-coming psychiatrists. So with that, I'm super excited to introduce Brittany Albright. Thanks so much for joining, Brittany.
Thank you, Eric. It's such a privilege and honor to be here, and quite frankly, a shock, because I never set out to be an entrepreneur. My plan was to be a physician and to treat individual patients one at a time. And so this journey has really taken me by complete surprise. And I'm actually looking forward to learning more from you today and actually getting some formal business advice from you. I'm putting you on the spot today.
Well, we'll go both ways on that. That'll be awesome. And by the way, the coolest thing about this podcast is the people I speak with, my business has, created some scale, but I get to learn just as much from what you've done at your business and the challenge you've overcome as hopefully I can share some of my experiences as well. So that's super cool. So before we go into anything, I was doing my, real deep research, and it's pretty obvious out there, but, the mental health epidemic has been, tons of data on it, tons of stats. And the stats I read were today it's almost 25% of all adults have some level of mental illness, 20% of all, adolescents have some level of mental illness, and only a little less than 50% have either access or can afford, care at this point. So take me back, and you start a little bit about, going into being a practitioner. What brought you into that space? What brought you, into this mindset of, I want to be, in psychiatry. I want to help people. What was that path to get to that point in time?
I really feel like in many ways it was a spiritual calling for me. I have always loved service work and I gravitated towards volunteer activities in middle school and high school where I was directly serving people and connecting with them on a deep level. And just like yourself, my dad's a physician and
Sure.
we're from Michigan too. And I loved working with him. Actually, my first job was with my dad being his intern at his office, and he worked for universities. He actually worked for University of Michigan for a long time, but it was just really neat to see what physicians got to do day in, day out. But I was doing the administrative side of things, and then I assisted him with research, and our research area was on pregnant women with substance use disorders. And I was more interested in the psychology of what led these women to this path, more so than actually delivering their baby, which that's what my dad does. He's an OBGYN. And so I became very interested in psychiatry as a field because when you really get to know these folks, which like you said, it's a quarter of our population that suffers from mental health issues, it's easy to really form a deep affection for this population. And I went to Emory University for my undergraduate studies, and the CDC is right next to my undergraduate university. So I became very interested in public health and disparities in our society, especially in this country, health equity issues, also just lack of access to care, like you mentioned, lack of affordability. And so I went to work on my master's degree in public health before medical school,
Well,
keeping an open mind as to what I would study and ultimately specialize in medical school. But my heart just always went back to psychiatry because those patients are my people, because those patients are us at the end of the
yeah,
day.
yeah, I love it. And so you graduate, you become a psychiatrist, and you could work for a lot of different firms, but you decide to start your own firm, which most people don't know this. It made a lot of sense because you had no business training. You had, big time student debt. You had a 1.5-year-old daughter and a baby on the way, which is perfect time to start a business. Everyone always says,
Exactly.
what's the right time to start the business? There is no good time to start the business, right? It's always going to be difficult. So with all those built-in challenges and obstacles, what made you kind of say, you know what, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it, and ended up starting, your practice.
Well, I felt like I was forced to in many ways, which sounds odd to say because my path was very academic. I did my psychiatry residency at Harvard, had tons of publications, lots of research under my belt. I was going to be an academic psychiatrist and contribute to the world in that way by producing research and by teaching. But my passion was always for psychotherapy, which unfortunately that's a dying breed in the field of psychiatry or physicians who actually do psychotherapy. But that was a huge part of my training. And everywhere that I interviewed at as I was finishing up my fellowship training in my early 30s, because it took me 14 years of education post high
Wow.
school to get where I'm at. And I'm happy to be an open book. I married my husband. I was 23. He was 24 at the time. We had collected, I think, around $200,000 worth of student loan debt between both of us, which that's actually quite low nowadays. I think most med students would be thrilled to only have that much
Yeah.
debt. My husband was a car salesman too, and so we were living paycheck to paycheck, didn't have a huge savings. I knew I had my family's emotional support. I knew that there was a safety net there if we ever were at risk of being homeless. I will give that caveat that I am privileged that even though my parents did not gift me financially in order to start a business, I knew that I had their emotional support, and I'm sure they wouldn't let me go without food if I if I was on that break.
By the way, you know what? It's funny you say that because when I started my first business, I always knew I never needed, never asked for money, but I knew there was some level of safety net where I wasn't going to starve, and not everybody has that gift of knowing, even though, by the way, I never had a conversation with my dad and never asked him if it was actually there, but I just, in my mental mindset, assumed I'm going to go for it. I want to do this. And if shit hits the fan, will somebody at least allow me to get back on my feet again? Which is something that a lot of people don't have. So I do feel, similar to you, I feel very blessed that I have that opportunity because many entrepreneurs do it without a safety net, which is, even scarier than what you and I had to go through.
It is. And in addition to my parents, I also had the safety net of my husband had a stable W-2 job. I don't know if you want to call the car business stable, but he was good at his job. And so from there, I interviewed at, all over the place in my community for different jobs. And I was very blessed to be offered jobs at everywhere I interviewed at, but none of them would give me the autonomy of being able to be a mom. For example, I just came from my daughter's school. I had lunch with her. Today it's her 8th birthday. And so that was important to me. I wouldn't be able to do that if I was on faculty at a university or working for the Veterans Administration, for example. Every place I interviewed at was a 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. type model, Monday through Friday, and they wouldn't allow therapy. It was all about productivity, RVUs. You need to do 15-minute med checks, 30 to 45-minute new patient intakes. And that's not why I chose psychiatry. I chose psychiatry to have long-term relationships where I could practice holistically and really be an ally and an advocate for my patients and to get to know them very deeply on a personal level, because that's where change really happens. It's through relationships. It's not through a pill, like the myth that psychiatry sometimes tries to propagate. And so I wanted to do things very differently. I was moonlighting at a private practice during my fellowship training in addiction psychiatry, and I saw this is doable. And that physician ended up moving. And so I was like, heck, I'm just going to start my own practice. And luckily, I had befriended a woman with office management experience, and she wanted to move with me. And so we started the practice. I pretty much did it by myself with her support. One thing I'm most proud of is I did not borrow a dime from anyone, especially not a bank. I did it all from my own financial resources, in addition to my husband, our collective financial resources, because we've always viewed in our 17-year marriage, we've always viewed our money as our money. We've always shared everything. It's both of our assets. We're a team. And so he supported me in doing this. Luckily, I did have an existing patient panel from the moonlighting gig I was doing, but it just started out with just me, and I had a second job. I think that's so important for entrepreneurs to realize when you're starting a business, you have to have another job to make ends meet. And so it took a lot of sacrifice. Like you mentioned, I had just had a baby. My 8-year-old now, she was 4 months old, I believe, when I started my practice and went out on my own. But I did have also the safety net of another 1099 job that was bringing stable income. And I just grew very, very slowly, very intentionally. And I never had a month where I didn't make my overhead or even make a small profit. So it works. And the nice thing about mental health is the demand is there. So it seemed like a fail-proof business. However, I'm learning from a lot of my colleagues that's not the case, unfortunately. And that's why it's one of my goals to try to educate fellow mental health practitioners that this is doable, but you have to be strategic and intentional and conservative about it.
Well, you bring up such a great point of one of the benefits of small business ownership or even entrepreneurship is there is that flexibility. I go to my daughter's, 10 a.m., poem reading class and when she was in 3rd grade, but then I get back on the computer at 8 p.m. to do what I need to do, essentially. So you have that kind of flexibility. With that flexibility comes a lot of responsibility. And so I'd love you to talk about some of the obstacles, some of the challenges, some of the multiple hats you had to wear during that early stage of your practice, because it really was just you and the things you had to do to kind of get the practice on solid footing to where you are today.
Yes, and there's so many challenges. Being an entrepreneur is certainly not for everyone. I always tell people I'm the worst boss I've ever had, and by far, because just like you said, I mean, a 70-hour work week, that's pretty normal, especially as you're starting out. And especially if, like me, you don't want to accept outside funding and you want this to be all yours because you don't want outside influence. And for me, it was I did the website, designed myself. I designed my logo by myself initially. I hired all my staff. I demoed all the different software platforms. Yeah, every single detail came down to me, and I wanted to utilize my own skills, and I love design too, so that was somewhat fun. Choosing a space, just taking your time and saving money wherever you can by doing it on your own. And it's so much easier nowadays.
Brittany, this is great for everyone to hear as we're kind of both, entrepreneurs, small business owners. We hear the dog in the background, which is our realities. As we're working, we often have to deal with, whether we're working at home or in the office, because I have to bring my dog to the office. I love that aspect of the just doing whatever you need to do. And sometimes it's a baby crying, and sometimes it's a dog in the background, and that's just part of it. So we're getting real life entrepreneurship going on right now.
Exactly. That's the beauty of being an entrepreneur is you can always be with your dogs. And also,
exactly.
You had asked earlier why psychiatry. I've been involved with therapy dog volunteering since I was an undergrad, and so my dogs obviously inspired me to be the doctor I am today because they are amazing listeners. They're very perceptive, as my dog is hearing yard maintenance people outside. And they're so loving, and it's unconditional love. And so I try to emulate in many ways what the affection my dog showed patients throughout my journey. I emulate that, except for the whole licking part.
Well, that's good. That's good. We'll keep you out of the lawsuits there. But
just a little bit.
You had mentioned you wanted to challenge, kind of the traditional aspects of healthcare, and what you were told during your interview process was you can't have all three. Pick your poison. You get two or three. You either get quality of care, affordability, or great access to care, but you can't have all three. So what was your mentality to try to say, you know what, that's BS. I can have all three, and my patients are going to have all three. And so how have you brought that into your practice?
Well, in residency, my residency program director lovingly called me anti-authoritarian. And so when I learned in my MPH degree that you can't have all three, quality, affordability, and accessibility, I said, I want to prove you wrong. And that's exactly what I did. And so that's out of all my accomplishments, besides my marriage, I've been with my husband since high school, I would say being able to prove that is possible in healthcare is a big win for me, because that's what our patients deserve. You shouldn't have to wait months for a new patient appointment. You shouldn't have to pay out of pocket when you're struggling with depression. And also, you shouldn't have to enter a rundown building, sit on an office chair from the 1980s, and have a 15-minute assessment, and then here's a pill. That's not what our patients deserve, but that's the type of model I was seeing when I interviewed around.
And how did you make that model work? Because obviously, the reason those other models exist is because from an economic standpoint, that's how they run their practices. And so how have you balanced running a thriving practice, bringing on more clinicians, and yet still providing that level of, value and a care to your patients?
A lot of it is by keeping overhead very low. For example, we spend, I think, maybe $50 a month on advertising for our practice with around 30 clinicians. And we advertise based on providing good work and word of mouth primarily. And so that really helps with our overhead as well. But I did want to invest in really beautiful spaces, really nice office furniture. One of our offices is actually located on the Intercoastal Waterway, so patients can enjoy the view while they're receiving therapy or esketamine treatments for depression. And another area where I didn't cut, because like I said, I try to do everything I can on my own, so I don't have to pay other people to do it. That being said, you need to invest in very good software that's efficient, accountants that has been extremely helpful, attorneys that are on call for you, IT
Yeah.
security folks. There are certain things that you can't compromise on financially. And then I would also add a beautiful, comfortable environment for your patients. And then lastly, one aspect I'm very proud of is that we pay our clinicians extremely well because they deserve that. They worked so hard. I understand the debt and the financial compromise we have to make to enter this career. And so we've had really great retention. And I think that's also helped with the bottom line is we're not constantly having to cycle through different physicians every year or two, like you said, a lot of medical practices.
Well, and you've built a real business. I mean, having 30 clinicians in multiple offices is not an easy thing to do. And so as you look at yourself as, first and foremost, a mental health caregiver, you're a entrepreneur, but you're also a business leader because you have a real business, right? And you're running, a business and you have people. So how do you define yourself and some of your leadership skills and what guides your kind of values as a leader?
Well, it's so weird because I still see myself as a physician first. I still see so many patients that I've treated for now 8, 9 years, which is the most rewarding aspect of my job. But one unintended consequence of now being a business owner, entrepreneur, established in the community is how much I've enjoyed providing high quality jobs for working parents, especially. And that's another really neat thing is we've never needed a recruiter. I've never posted Indeed job ads for clinicians. They've just found us because I lead with my values, which are family first, faith-based, but that's not something I push on anyone, of course. And really focusing on work-life balance, which I don't necessarily practice what I preach, and I need to for my own personal sanity, but I honor my commitments, I honor my word. And for me, it's really important that working parents have a space where they can take as much time off as they need to for parental leave. They can show up to every event for their kids. If they are sick, if they are feeling burnt out, they can take time off and we'll support them in that. And so our employment model is completely different than most other gigs you'll find too, where all of our clinicians are 1099. They set their own work hours and they really, as I tell them, it's almost like they have their own business within our business and we provide all the infrastructure and we all work as a team because I also want to foster the entrepreneurial spirit, especially in younger female clinicians.
Well, that's amazing. And so we've talked about a lot of the successes and the building, the growth, I would love to know any, and maybe there's none, but any of the setbacks you had along the way as you're building your practice. What were some of the pitfalls that you maybe didn't expect that you look back now and were like, well, that was a really great learning opportunity for me?
Thank you, Eric. There's been so many pitfalls. So the last thing I want to do is make any of this look easy or fun or glamorous because it's not, as you know so well. I know I've learned a lot about your journey through your podcast, and it's nothing but easy. And I've tried to reframe my mindset when bad things have occurred, that this is a growth opportunity. This is a positive learning experience, and just trying to be optimistic about all the challenges. And there have been so many. I would say staffing administratively has been one of our largest hurdles. I know just about every business in the country is facing this unique challenge of finding very reliable employees that will show up to work and that are passionate about the work that they're doing. Because not everyone is great at being the front line for mental health. And especially our administrative staff, they take a lot of heat. Our patients are hurting, they're suffering, they're not always pleasant when they call in over the phone. And so there's very high burnout rates, there's very high turnover rates. As you know, benefits are getting more and more expensive to provide, but that's something I'm passionate about providing. And so that's been a huge challenge. Also, in this country, around 40% of our healthcare expenditures are administrative, which is really, really disheartening. And it's the inefficiencies of the US healthcare system that have been, I think, the largest challenge for all of us in the mental health care and just any medical practice space of how do we collaborate care when someone uses a different EHR or if they don't have a fax. We also have to follow HIPAA regulations. How do we manage billing when there's about 3,000 different insurance plans and supplemental plans out there? How do you connect someone to your on-patient portal when they're 85 years old and vision impaired, for example? There's
Right, right.
great software now, but there's not one integrated solution. And so we use probably 10 different softwares at my practice. And that's really challenging, especially when there's high employee turnover rates, trying to train everyone in all these different moving parts. I will say too, the most disheartening aspect about running a business is I have rose-colored glasses, and I tend to think the best in people. But I've also suffered of being taken advantage of. I've had money embezzled from me. I've been betrayed by people I thought that I could trust. So there's been a lot of challenges along the road, to say the
Yeah,
least.
you know what? I appreciate that because, everyone thinks, they see the up and to the right. They see hopefully some of the success you've had and like, oh, wow, that's great. But, when you've been betrayed, whether that is financially or other areas and the hurt and just the personal hurt that feels beyond the damage it does to your business. And, the hardest thing I always tell people, and you do the same thing, is just every day, if you don't bring your positivity, if you don't recharge yourself and have that smile on your face, people are looking at you every single day. And I always say, like, who am I looking at? Like, everyone's looking at me for like reassurance that it's all going to be okay. And I'm like, well, who am I looking at? Right. And similar to you, friends, family, confidants, mentors, people that have truly helped along the way, which I think is so critical because without that, we are alone. And we were often alone building our own businesses because nobody else has the full view that we have with everything. So I appreciate you bringing up some of those real challenges because they're real, as you say, they do exist. So I want to transition into something you just talked about, all the challenges within the healthcare system, a lot of administrative stuff. I want to get your view on kind of the innovation side of this. And it's really broken into two pieces, both technology and some of the treatment plans. Let's start with technology first. And I'm extremely interested in the treatment stuff. So we'll get there in a second. But from a technology standpoint, how do you see AI, both helping you within your kind of practice, as well as potentially the larger, overall healthcare system, and what positive changes you see that happening?
I am so excited that AI is here. I am such an adopter of this technology and I cannot wait.
Sure.
I think it's really going to solve a lot of my current struggles. And there's days where I am really worn down. I am heartbroken from things that have happened in the business and from working 100-hour weeks and not feeling appreciated and like you said, feeling lonely in a way. Although I'm so fortunate to have wonderful mentors that I've found now. But I really feel like AI in particular is going to solve so many of the issues, particularly with prior authorizations. I'm already using it to scribe notes, and that's been really transformative for billing, for automation, for onboarding new patients. All of these tasks that we currently have to do manually, I think within the next couple of years. And I'm counting on you, Eric, to make this
It's
happen for
coming.
me.
We have a lot of really cool stuff in the roadmap so you don't have to use 10 different softwares. I mean, our goal in the next 6 to 12 months is a lot of the things you're talking about are all going to be fully integrated into your platform. So you don't have to think about it as a doctor. You're going to be able to get those services kind of fully integrated. within your practice so you can focus on providing care. What do you think about AI from a treatment, less psychiatry because it's not going to be prescription, but from a psychology and therapist standpoint, there's a lot of use cases right now. By the way, good and bad. We've read about the bad as well when people who may need real help are utilizing AI and maybe have some dire consequences for that. But how do you see AI from a therapy standpoint, helping people to, provide care when potentially they don't have access to care? Is that a real path, or is that kind of a pipe dream?
My hope is that it will continue to destigmatize mental health and access to care. And I think with any new technology, there's so many benefits and so much potential, but there have to be safeguards. And I think that's what we're encountering now, that there's just not a lot of safeguards. But I really feel like it's going to be a tremendous asset to our patients and to our clinical practice, along with clinician oversight of the online therapy. I mean, we already have several FDA cleared digital therapeutic apps, which show great evidence basis for conditions like major depression. So it has the potential to save our healthcare system a lot of money and really help patients. But at the end of the day, you can't replace human connection.
Yeah.
And so I think there will always be a need for in-person clinical assistance, or at least I hope there will be. I can't imagine a world where we're all just connected to robots online.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. And so that's innovation from a, technology, both in-house as potentially, out-of-house services. You talk a lot about, kind of being in cutting edge of healthcare and in the psychiatry field. You mentioned one of your patients getting ketamine treatments while they're, looking at the beautiful ocean, which is pretty cutting edge, right? I mean, obviously it's become more the norm. There's specific, clinics around that. But I'd love to learn more about how you have seen kind of psychedelics, ketamine, others become real beneficial therapeutic means for patients with a variety of different, ailments.
Well, I love my field, but I'm the first to admit that we have not made innovations or strides in decades, and our patients deserve so much better than the treatments we've been offering them. And it's only been in the last 5 years or so with medications like S-ketamine, which is very similar. It's like a derivative of ketamine that's been FDA approved for treatment-resistant depression. And then there's transcranial magnetic stimulation that was FDA cleared a little over 15 years ago for treatment-resistant depression and OCD actually as well.
Interesting.
And these interventions are significantly more effective than your traditional pills, your Prozacs, Lexapro, Celexa, about double as effective. And in many ways, they're often safer because you're not having to take a pill every day. You're not having to deal with daily side effects from medications, especially weight gain, sexual side effects, emotional blunting can occur from a lot of medications. And so they can really be used as monotherapy for depression, which is so exciting. And they're all FDA cleared or approved and covered by insurance. And so one of my goals is to get the information out to the general public that you don't have to settle for the status quo of a pill, that we have new innovations that are more effective, that will work for folks and are safer too.
And are those kind of ongoing treatments? Are those kind of permanent fixes after a period of treatments?
We have to unfortunately look at treatment resistant depression or difficult to treat depression. And most depression is recurrent. There are folks who suffer from a transient situational stressor that can lead to a depressive episode. But unfortunately, most major depression is like high blood pressure or diabetes, where it is a chronic illness, but there are things that you can do to get it into remission or to make it more tolerable. And so that's how we view depression at this point. My hope is that there will be a cure during my career. I will work hard to try to achieve that. That's one of my goals, is to work myself out of a job, actually. But unfortunately, all
I don't
these
know, Brittany. We live in the world we live in is getting more intense, more, just every day the pressures the stressors that we're feeling that, our human bodies can't digest all of that, right? Which probably leads, when I say bodies, mental bodies as well. And so all of that intensity that we're feeling on a daily basis is clearly driving more of the kind of, mental epidemic, which already existed. I think you brought up something, the stigma is becoming less and less. So people who have been, I mean, who've been being challenged for years are now willing to raise their hand and say, yeah, there's got to be a better way because this doesn't feel good. So no, it's so interesting. It's so amazing that you guys are pushing the limits with that. And I'm sure some of that is even being brought to learn more about, your involvement with the, the Psych Congress. What is that? And what are the things you're doing with that kind of your national speaking within that organization that is helping to move some of these kind of more cutting edge modalities forward?
I've been so blessed by my involvement in Psych Congress, and that's just like today. It's another situation where it's like, how did I get here? It's so neat. It's the largest national CME organization for psychiatry besides the American Psychiatric Association. And they're really known for delivering very cutting edge lectures, not about what we have been doing in the past, but it's about what are we doing today and what are we looking at in the future? What's in the pipeline for the FDA? How can we learn about this now? So when this treatment is FDA approved and available, we can immediately disseminate it. And so that's been a great platform for me to provide education to my fellow clinicians. But this past year, I have noticed a gaping hole in the market, and there's no space where private practice clinicians like myself or people interested in starting their own practice, there's no space for them to get together and brainstorm and network and learn from each other. And so I pitched this idea to the CEO. His name's Randy Robbins, great guy. And I was shocked. He said yes right away.
That's so cool.
Wow.
That's so cool.
So luckily, we are implementing that actually next spring in Nashville at what's called the NP Institute. We're going to have a private practice pre-conference. And then also in Las Vegas next June at the Psych
That's so
Elevate
cool.
conference. And my goal is to impart all my knowledge and wisdom and failures on fellow clinicians who are doing what I do or want to do what I do.
Well, yeah, that was a perfect transition for my last two questions, which are really dealing with advice and things you've learned. So, what advice would you give to somebody just starting off in your field today? Both from how they should be thinking about the field and should they think about starting their own practice?
I would advise them to not compromise on their values and to keep searching for a job home that aligns with their values and where patient care is at the center and the priority of all they do. I attribute all the success of Sweetgrass Psychiatry to patient care. We're doing the right thing by our patients, and then people have come alongside us and joined us. And that's why we've been successful, not because I know what I'm doing or I'm an entrepreneur or a businesswoman. As you mentioned, Eric, I have no experience. But when you're fiscally conservative, you grow slowly and you do the right thing by your patients and you have a good billing company that collects for you. Of course, that's extremely important and great software to support you along that journey. It's very possible, but be prepared to make a lot of sacrifices along the way.
Well, with that, the parting wisdom you could provide is what would be the top two lessons you've learned in your journey that you think could be helpful for other people as they begin, whether that is in the mental health field or really any type of entrepreneurial small business pursuit?
The benefits are not financial. The benefits are the relationships you form, the impact you make on your community, and the flexibility you have to be present with your family.
It's amazing. Well, Brittany, Dr. Albright, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I both appreciated your time and how much I've learned and inspired by a lot of things you're doing that are relevant to myself, my family, and all of our communities. So thank you again, Brittany. Thank you for joining me on this episode. I'd like to invite you to subscribe to Business Underdog on your favorite podcast platform. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode and you'll be the first to hear these incredible stories. Please be sure to follow us on social and visit our website at businessunderdog.com for episode updates, resources, and more. And thank you for listening today. Until next time, stay inspired, keep pushing forward, and embrace your inner underdog.